Jamie, Tom. All right, feel free to introduce yourselves even as we get started, but welcome. Um, my name is Ken Spiro. I am the founder and president of SchoolSims. Delighted to have you here today. Want to say from the outset, please feel free at any point in time to submit questions or comments in chat. Certainly make every attempt to get to them, whether during as appropriate or certainly at the end, where there'll be time for questions and answers. But we're here to talk about a little bit about simulations and this kind of approach, certainly scalable. Fundamentally, our operating premise is that experience is the best teacher. I've been doing this for 35 years, only more recently in K-12. And I know that certainly if we didn't know it from how we grow from infancy, that experience is the best teacher. Certainly I've seen it. And so begs the question is, if we know that experience is the best teacher, and we know from before we go into that, just give you, heads up to the idea that there's access to additional information on our website. So at any point in time, any questions you have, there's certainly access to that. So sorry for the interruption, but just to make sure that you're aware of that. But so coming back to this question of experience being the best teacher and learning by doing, you can call it what you like. But we know from other industries that simulations approximate experience. For instance, you wouldn't put a pilot in a plane. You wouldn't put a doctor or nurse into a patient suite, or certainly not a soldier in the field without hours and hours of simulation. We feel the same applies to our teachers, right? There are so many things that happen in the classroom that you can't teach, right? As I'm sure, as you all know, right? There are things that come up that are totally contextual, that are totally by surprise, that there are so many different trade-offs at play in the moment that you don't know what the answer is. There's not necessarily a right answer because one student needs one thing, another student needs another, or students need one thing and the parents want another, or the district wants, or the school wants, the school leadership wants something, but the students need another, right? You're caught in between the need to respond to different stimuli, if you will, and make the best decision you can to exercise good judgment, right? You don't know that you're going to get it right. And so on the one hand, it's important that we be thoughtful, that we be able to approach things in a thoughtful way, that we can make the best decision we can. But at the same time, we need to be resilient because no matter what you do, somebody's not going to like what you did. And therefore, you're going to, you have to be able to roll with the hopefully figurative punches because they're going to fly. They're going to be there, right? The question is, are you able to have thick enough skin to navigate that? And the thing about judgment and resilience as two key skill areas is that you can't teach either of them. The only way we get better at them is through experience. And of course, as you all know, the school of hard knocks is rather painful. And so how do we in fact provide experience, but safe experience for our aspiring teachers, even for our sitting teachers, from a professional learning perspective, because there's always something, right? Every day is filled with unprecedented things, right? Everything's unprecedented until it happens, and every day is filled with things that hadn't happened before. So how do we navigate when those circumstances require us to do that? How do we develop that capability? And so that's what the simulations are really all about. Simulations are, again, a simulation of real life, but we capture problems of practice, but in a browser-based application so that they can go wherever your teachers are, whether it's in the classroom as part of synchronous development, whether it's take-home assignments, you can do them asynchronously. It's totally up to the objectives of your program, but the opportunity to provide an opportunity to experience the content that's being taught in a way that they can apply it, in the way they can see it, see how it happens when it doesn't present as neatly as it did in the book. And or it comes a little messy, right? It's like it was so clear when you were teaching it, and yet in life, it's never that clear. And so how do you utilize that information? It becomes a wonderful opportunity for application. Furthermore, when you use this, when you're having an experience, right, no matter how strategically you've laid out your curricula, right, life doesn't happen in that order. You try, obviously we do the best we can, but life happens. Life happens and it's messy. There are things that are happening at the same time. They're overlapping, they're integrated, and again, they're out of order. So how do we navigate when it presents in that way? Again, since in simulation, what we're simulating is time, we're simulating messy. There's that opportunity for experiencing it in that way and also to discover what you don't know, right? Students go through this and they realize, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to have this conversation. And now they're motivated to take the class, right? They're motivated for that next step. And so it creates that spiral opportunity where you're engaging them with the content, you're further engaging them in the application and the simulation, and then they're obviously motivated to see what comes and what they're motivated for the next class because they want to address, they've identified a skill gap of theirs and they want some help with that. And that is what the integrated or blended learning approach can allow for when you blend the instructional elements which you already have with the experience components of what a simulation can provide. That creates a wonderful blend. And we differentiate between how students learn from instruction versus how we learn from experience, right? When it comes to instruction, you're teaching your students what they need to know. You're teaching them the frameworks that will help them, that they should follow. You're teaching them the best practices as are known or as are documented in particular issues that happen in the classroom or around particular subject matter areas. And that's great. However, our best learning opportunities and experience don't come from getting it right. Our best learning opportunities and experience actually come from making mistakes, from failing, right? So whereas you wouldn't teach people how to fail, experience must be designed with that in mind, right? Because that we want to provide that opportunity to step in it, so to speak, and learn from it, right? Have that opportunity to reflect on, wow, why did that happen? And understand what the implications are for their own practice, and bringing those two learning methods together can make for a very powerful experience for your students, and obviously something that's more memorable, that's sticky, and that has the opportunity to help them downstream. So, for me, having been doing this for so long, for me, it begs the question, why isn't everybody simulating? I can't understand it, right? Because we know if I asked you, fill in the blank, blank is the best teacher, chances are most of you would have filled in either experience or life, something along those lines. We know this. So why isn't everybody doing this kind of thing? Especially with something like that's so contextual as teaching or administrating in a school. And what I've hypothesized, by the way, we can do it synchronously, asynchronously. You can obviously do it wherever your students are since it's browser-based. And we'll come back to that as we're going to play a sim, so you'll see what we mean. But one of the things that I think that is really at play here is we're biased as human beings. If those of you who are fans of behavioral economics, issues of mindfulness, not necessarily from the yoga perspective or the meditation perspective, but actually mindfulness as opposed to mindlessness, right? Where we don't think. There's a lot of research that's been done about the decision-making biases and heuristics that we have as human beings. We are mindless, habit-forming creatures by nature. And one of the things that's you probably know from yourselves, or certainly you've read it, is that we love certainty, right? We like to know. We like to have the answers. We like to be comfortable that even though we may not have the answers, we can get the answers and that we have some levels of certainty. The flip side of that is that we really, really don't like uncertainty. And there is such a thing that's been researched called the uncertainty aversion or ambiguity aversion. And I think that is kind of what keeps people from simulating, because simulation is really all about the uncertainty of life, right? Because we're capturing things that we don't know what to do, but we're going to have to do it anyway, because not doing it is not an answer, right? We're going to have to teach our students. So even though we may not know exactly how the day is going to go, we have to navigate. The problem with dealing with this uncertainty aversion is we maybe avoid things, or if there's something that we're not certain about how it's going to happen, we also have a negativity bias, and we start to think that bad things might happen, especially if we've had a run of difficult situations. And having a negativity bias, then we get into catastrophizing. We tend to think about the worst is going to happen, the worst case scenarios, which makes us feel like this creates a vicious cycle. So how do we, if this is in fact happening, we can't change the reality, which is the uncertainty. But what we can do is affect our students' abilities from a self-efficacy perspective to feel like, I know it's going to be uncertain, but I'm actually okay with that. I can handle it. And anything we can do to affect that efficacy is going to obviously help to reduce that uncertainty aversion. It's not going to be, we're not going to get to certainty, but certainly we can feel a little bit better about dealing with what we're dealing with. And that's what simulation really allows us to do. It allows us to in a scalable way, provide opportunities to engage in difficult content, and in that way, be able to deal, if you will. So I'm going to open up a simulation. We're going to try one on dealing with parent-teacher conferences. And I think that it's probably been, at least certainly in my observation as a parent and as a board member in the past, observing teacher behavior, that there's a fair amount of uncertainty associated with parent-teacher conferences. You don't know, the teachers don't know what they're going to see when the parents come in, and it's very easy to be worried. And so this is an opportunity to capture this kind of problem of practice for practice in a safe space. So we will do that. Any questions, thoughts? Anybody feel compelled to share? Please do.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late in joining the call. I'm actually teaching a class, but it's like office hours now. But I wanted to ask about your question. Like, this begs the question of like, why don't we engage in simulation all the time? I teach math, and so I'm wondering, like, is this idea around like, do we engage our students in what real world truly feels like, because the curriculum hasn't caught up to yet what we expect to be able to provide our students, right? I think that there's a lot of math that's still taught in the same way that it all started when we wanted to produce factory workers. Has there been any company that has had the opportunity to then also pitch and go out to all these districts and say, hey, here's a way that we can kind of still teach the same math concepts, but in a real world based way, not quasi real world scenarios, right? Like, nobody's actually going to the supermarket buying 100 somewhat watermelons or whatever.
So that's a great question. I don't have names for you. I've come across them and I don't remember the names right this minute. So we're actually focusing obviously on teachers, but the modality, the approach in terms of the underlying approach that we take to dealing with contextual challenges that teachers face can certainly be applied in the classroom to students. So in terms of, like you asked, I mean, I always wondered why, if CSI, for instance, right, the show CSI on television, right? To me, that always struck me as it's a very popular show. It's been around forever. They've created all kinds of additional versions of it from different cities' perspective. But fundamentally, at its core, the investigation that goes on in a CSI is math, or it's STEM, right? The what they apply in terms of how, where a bullet, the trajectory of where a bullet was shot from, right? That's math. And so the opportunity to utilize that kind of narrative and put students into that kind of setting, if you will, in which they're experiencing the application of the content and then wanting to know more, right? That's a wonderful place to be. So I have seen, I did come across, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, and I feel badly that I can't give you the answer. There is a company that actually is doing this now, and actually doing it using AI. If you can reach out to me after the session, I know who to ask to get the name of that. But apparently it's a startup out of California that is doing this, especially relating to STEM, and I can get that to you. So I appreciate the question, and certainly would encourage you. Back in my father, actually, back in the 70s, he taught math and physics, and wrote a teacher guide for a game which was called Race into Space, Buzz Aldrin's Race into Space. And in that, the whole purpose of the game was the race into space between the US and the Soviet Union. and you have to design an entire space program. So how do you use that? Because you're teaching history, you're teaching world geopolitical issues. You have to, you're getting into chemistry because you're getting into jet fuel trajectories because of you have to shoot the rockets. So you're actually able to cover a full curriculum of topics inside of a game. And again, the power of the narrative to get you engaged in a story can be very powerful. And that's the method that we use in terms of we're capturing kind of life. So that's the narrative for adults. But again, the same kind of thing. If we get the engagement of the student, then the power of being able to get them motivated in that engagement and to practice becomes very, very powerful. Any other questions? Okay, well, feel free to do so. So again, this is a sample of a simulation, the parent-teacher conference. One of the things we point out in the beginning is that there's no back button. As in life, there's no do-overs, no mulligans. You're going to make decisions. It's a choose your own adventure kind of activity where we're going to make decisions and follow the path based on that choice to see what happens and deal with the flow of time as it plays out. But if you want to play it again and see what another path would show, you got to play the whole sim again because it's all about experience, and each experience is valuable. And so we don't want you to kind of give it a pause by going back. Live it, because often what is certain again is that we're going to make mistakes, and not practicing dealing with mistakes leaves you unprepared. And also, these are not really designed to teach. Again, we distinguish between the instruction and the experience component. The simulations are designed around a particular context, which means that since these are contextual issues, you may have a different opinion. And that's great, because if you've critically thought about it, then we've accomplished our objective, right? So the goal here is critical thinking, not to teach you the way to deal with a parent-teacher conference. This will be a way, and there will be good, better decisions and worse decisions in this context. But again, it's designed to provoke critical thinking. It's designed to be an experience. It's designed to get them to think about what's going on. And they can agree or disagree, because if they can explain why, then again, that objective has been accomplished.
In this simulation, you will be introduced to a real-life scenario where you will be presented with challenges and choices. As you interact with a parent during a conference, your path through the simulation will result from the decisions you make, as well as their consequences. At the end of the simulation, you will be provided with specific feedback on the choices you made in a feedback report. We hope this experience will offer you some insight to apply in your practice.
Okay, so for us, the simulation embodies context. It's all taking place. So situational awareness is the first skill set. Then there's exercising judgment. We're going to make decisions. Then there's experiencing consequences. There's always blowback. There's no such thing as a one and done. So we're going to have to navigate consequences. And then ultimately we get feedback, right? Because without feedback, the experience is only the best teacher when there's an opportunity to reflect. So the sim will actually provide feedback, and depending on how you're using it, there may be reflection happening throughout. And again, you'll see how we're doing this synchronously as an example here, but you could equally do it asynchronously if you would be assigning it, if that would be how you're navigating your course.
The simulation takes place about 9 weeks into the school year on one of the drop-in parent-teacher conference nights. The conferences are listed on the school calendar, and the principal's office does the promoting and reminding of parents of the dates and times. The conferences are held from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on 2 consecutive evenings. There are no appointments necessary to conference with a teacher. All the teachers are available in their classrooms, and parents drop in to visit with any or all of their child's teachers, one at a time.
So somebody had mentioned that my screen is coming up a little blurry. Is that still the case? Are you able to see? Is everybody seeing okay? All right. Please let me know if that's so we can switch. I have staff on. Okay, so there's a little bit of context, right? It's important. 9 weeks into the school year, right? Time of year is relevant, right? We're going to be different, whether it's the 9th week of the year or the 25th week of the year, right? That's going to be different in terms of how we interact or what we expect in our interactions with our parents. Here's a little bit more.
The principal has communicated with teachers that the basic information to share at conferences is the student's academic performance and any concerns about the student's behavior. As the teacher, you and the school have communicated to parents that a student's academic grades and behavior issues are posted to the online electronic student management system in real time. Parents can check them anytime. You also send a weekly newsletter to all parents via email each week, highlighting the week's learning and previewing next week's learning. The school also encourages parents and teachers to initiate a meeting anytime either party feels a student is falling behind and needs more or different support.
So one of the opportunities as you're going through this, as you're presenting it, now you can be doing this from the front of the room. You can actually be assigning this to small groups and in breakouts, again, either virtually or in person. Your students can be engaging in small teams. Things may jump out at them that if they're student teaching or if they've obviously been in classrooms before, there may be things that strike them as different. And again, provoking that kind of potential discussion is part of the process, or you can embed questions, right? Once they're engaged, you can prompt them with additional things beyond what's in the simulation. That's all part of the learning process, because once they're engaged, once the hooks are in, then you have a lot of range in terms of what you can do to harness the experience to achieve very specific objectives that you have in your curriculum.
Before continuing in the simulation, please share what information you currently bring to parent-teacher conferences. Also, reflecting on your experience, do parents find that information useful and valuable? How do you know?
So, as I mentioned, it's a choose your own adventure. We're going to get to choices where you're going to have to make, decisions. But sometimes there's other additional prompts that we want to know how they're thinking. And it's not necessarily built around a decision that we're going to ask them, but we do want to get them thinking. So what information would you bring into a parent-teacher conference? Please feel free to post in chat. What are some of the things that you would do? What are some of the pieces of information that you would bring with you? And how do you know that that parents find it useful? I mean, obviously you're bringing things that you think are going to be useful. How do you know? Okay, academic performance, good. Engagement in lessons, social learning, excellent. How they're playing with others. And by the way, just so obviously if we were doing this, I'll see if I can actually capture them. Okay, so now these are captured and placed into the feedback report, which I'll show you at the end. Anecdotal records, excellent. Excellent. And how do we know that that parents find these useful? And you can go ahead and just take off the mic, mute and speak up if anybody wants to share.
Hi, sorry, there's like background noise. I still running office hours with some of my students. I think that like the job of a school is to educate students, and oftentimes like parents are sending us their kids because they want to see growth in their academic performance, and they also want to know that they're raising humans that interact well with others and can go off into society and be independent. So I think those are things that would be important to bring and to share.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else? And this really is part of the process as you engage with your students, obviously, in terms of having them come up with, and again, this may be something that has been taught, or maybe something that you're looking for them to figure out on their own, but the opportunity to bring that information, to capture it here, and then to move on, obviously, to get ready for the conferences as they play out.
One last conference. It's been a long week, but you are almost done with this final round of parent-teacher conferences. Near the end of the second evening of parent-teacher conferences, at approximately 7:45 p.m., conferences are scheduled to conclude at 8 p.m., you're sitting in your classroom after a lull in conferences. Your thoughts about getting home soon are interrupted by the appearance of another parent in the doorway of your classroom. It looks like you will have one more conference tonight. You wave the parent in, they sit down and introduce themselves and share the name of their student. Then they continue.
I'm sorry it's so late. I really wanted to be here to speak with you. I mean, I'd rather not be here at all, and I'd rather not feel like I needed to speak with you, but I do think there are some performance issues that need to be addressed.
You recognize the name of the student who seems nice but has not seemed very motivated to learn. How would you begin the conversation? Start by sharing a positive comment about the student. Best to begin on an upbeat note to get things going. Start by calling attention to the short amount of time left for the conference. Get right to the point and get the conference focused on the student. Start by stating that this conference is about helping the parent support their student. This is a helpful way to quickly engage the parent and focus on their role. Start by suggesting that rescheduling a conference may be a good idea due to the time crunch. There are several important items related to this student's performance. It may be best to reschedule at a time that works for the parent.
So we're going to have to make a choice here. We're going to have to make a decision. So before we do engage in discussion, we're going to issue a poll and ask you to choose 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the choices. The number 5 is if you don't see your choice there, if you would think that you'd do something else, then choose 5. Well, if you can just pick 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or 5. Now, the reason we issue the poll first, and obviously you can do this if you're doing this in person without the polls, please feel free to continue thinking and choosing an answer.
Ken, I'm sorry, I'm muting. I apologize to interrupt you, but I cannot read the screen, and it looks like I might not be the only one, given the chat, that people are having this issue with.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Can't read the options. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Danielle, would you mind calling up the sim on yours?
Yep.
I apologize for that. And thank you for sharing. I thought that maybe we had gotten there, but I guess it didn't get any better. Okay, so hopefully we can try this again.
Much better, thank you.
Thank you for interrupting, and I'm sorry that it went on as long as it did without you being able to read. So let's take a moment again to read the parent has started off. It's late in the conference time, and we can either start by sharing a positive comment about the student. We can start by calling attention to the short amount of time in the conference. We can start by stating that this conference is about helping the parent support their student, or start by suggesting that rescheduling a conference may be a good idea due to the time crunch. And if you feel that there's a different option, that would be number 5. Okay, let's take 10 more seconds. Okay, let's end the poll. So here's where we talk about why. Like, why did you choose? Did one of the people who chose 3 want to share why they chose 3?
I felt like if the parent already came in and said to me that they really wanted to meet with me, then I want to make sure that I frame the remaining time for the evening about how I would help to support them to help their child to be successful and feel successful in our class.
Excellent, thank you. How about somebody who chose 4? Okay. Did the person who chose 5 want to share what they didn't see that was there that they would like to, that they would have done differently?
That was me. She came in and already seems to have concerns. So I would like to hear what she has to say first. For time's sake, I want to go ahead and address the reason why she chose to come in.
That's great. So, one of the things that we do in selecting choices, again, the goal here is critical thinking. And often if there's going to be I don't want to say an obvious choice, but if there would be something that is going to be, that may stymie some of the critical thinking, right, that to go beyond, then sometimes we don't even include it because we want to provoke it in discussion, because the goal here is not to necessarily get a high score, right? The goal is to have that opportunity for critical thinking, and that's a great idea. It wasn't included, but again, we'd want to get that dialogue going in terms of, do we need to be so focused on time? And that could open up a whole nother set of issues, right? If the goal is to have the parent-teacher conference, start the conference, right? So in terms of being able to engage in this way, it is designed to provoke. And so thank you for that. Anybody else want to share? So we actually have a tie between 3 and 4. So we actually have to choose one. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and choose 3.
I think I understand your perspective, but our time is limited and I'm not interested in talking about my role. I'm here to look at why my child's performance and motivation have gone down in your class. Can we please stay focused on those areas?
So as I mentioned, it is a choose your own adventure exercise. And so there would have been a different response had we chosen differently. So in terms of, now we're here. So once again, we come back to do just a quick pause to take a kind of an internal inventory. And how are you feeling about the parent's response and this interaction that we're going to have with the student, about the student with the parent? And the reason why we wanted to have this pause here, sometimes we'll use this approach to have you justify the choice that you made, to give you some of the rationale, again, to get some of that critical thinking on paper, so to speak. But one of the things we also want to do is, given the stress associated with the job and part of that uncertainty that we talked about, we want to validate how teachers are feeling, right? If you're feeling stressed, that's okay. This is stressful, but you don't want to make a decision based on your emotional response, right? You want to be thoughtful. So even with your emotions, we want to validate the emotions, but then be able to take that pause, take a breath, and then be thoughtful about the response that we're going to take. So that's why we interject here with this, because we want to allow for that validation of the emotional response, and then we're ready to be able to move on. Any thoughts on that before we move on? Okay, Danielle.
Responding to the parent, you acknowledge the parent's concerns and then let them know that you will work to review as much academic and behavior information as possible within the conference time tonight, which can serve as the basis for continued discussion. Before you can go on, you look up and see what you presume to be another parent looking into the classroom and waiting in the doorway. It seems they are there to visit with you before conference is in for the night at 8 p.m. in 10 minutes.
So obviously, what we want to do in experience is to capture some of the reasons why we don't always get it right. And some of those are because we don't know. Some of those are because we're distracted, right? The things are happening, and we're never in a moment in which we're in a vacuum and nothing else is happening. And so our ability to think through what we should do is hampered by what comes up. And so we want to capture some of that, right, to some degree. And again, keeping it real, because that obviously, from the emotional engagement perspective, from making this a memorable experience, from what we know about neuroscience, emotional engagement is key to keep this memorable. So if we add the stressors, this is an opportunity to get at some of those, not just the decisions one should make, but experiencing what it's like so that, again, from a mirror perspective, we have the opportunity to capture that feeling so that when we do face it again, we actually can draw upon, oh yeah, that's what that felt like. This is a little bit more intense, but again, I remember what that was like. So just slow it down a little bit. And also, this would be an opportunity if there are other things that link to some of the lessons that are coming up in the curriculum where there might be opportunity for further discussion. But let's go ahead, Danielle.
You now feel rushed to complete this conference, which will not serve anyone well. What do? Excuse yourself to tell the new parent that you will meet with them, but will need to go beyond 8 p.m. Set expectations now so you don't feel so rushed. Tell the conference parent that time is getting even more limited and urge them to schedule another meeting with you. It just won't work to rush through this meeting. Stay focused on conferencing with the current parent and keep moving. Maybe you won't need the entire time with this parent after all.
Okay, let's go quickly to now we could also use the breakouts and send you out into breakouts and have you talk as a team and then come back and then reissue the survey. But obviously in the interest of time, not going to do that, but that's something that, the goal again is the critical thinking and the opportunity to get the peer-to-peer learning as well, right? Because these are based on perspective. This is interpretation. This is an opportunity for students to share how they feel. And the person sitting next to them, one of the things we love to hear is when students say, I never would have thought of it that way. And they've actually heard that from a fellow student. Please feel free to vote. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, let's take 10 more seconds. Okay, there we have it. So choice 1 is certainly the choice. Did the person, anybody who chose choice 3 want to share what they were thinking? Okay, well, I'll project that, obviously staying focused, letting the parent know that we're going to focus now, that we're not going to be pushing them out. Obviously would be something that you'd want to state. And again, we're putting words in the mouth, which is obviously it's not a good idea to put words in how somebody would say something, because how we use language is obviously very individualized. But these are obviously stylistically 3 different approaches. And so it's kind of like, what are you leading with in terms of intentionality? That is obviously say it any way you would say it. But in terms of what's driving your thinking, obviously these are somewhat different. Anybody who selected 1 want to share why they chose 1? Okay, obviously you're telling the other parent that, you're just setting the stage, letting them know, and obviously communicating to the parent that's sitting in front of you that you're going to focus on them. Did anybody who chose 4 want to share what their other option was?
That was me. I like option 1. I just would I would tell that parent they needed to call the school and schedule a time to come in and meet, because we would be out of time. Because like at my school, if we have something that's going to end at 8, the building will empty at 8, and I'm not going to be alone with a parent after that time. So.
And that's wonderful to have come up, right? Because this is when we talk about context, right? Understanding the context of a particular building, right? The rules and the expectations, those are going to be different, and having them expressed and talked about, because what we want to do is surface assumptions that are being made. And certainly where there's less experience under one's belt, being able to express this way or to actually articulate those becomes very important, because that's something that they learn to then ask about if they don't actually know, to check those assumptions before getting stuck with what may happen by not knowing. But thank you. Let's go ahead with 1. Yep.
Not excused. You ask the parent you are meeting with to excuse you while you speak briefly to the parent in the classroom doorway, and they respond with a curt, "No, I will not excuse you. This is about my child. Let's please stay focused. Other parents can wait just like I did." You look up to see that the parent who was waiting is no longer there, which has you feeling less rushed. How will you go about sharing academic and behavior information with this parent? You pull up the student's academic performance in your online gradebook and read to the parent a series of scores based on daily work, homework, and tests. Next, you mention any behavior incidents recorded and share additional observations of the student's lack of effort and disinterest in learning. You ask the parent what they wish to learn about their student's academic performance or behavior before sharing your information. Start by eliciting the parent's input. You provide the parent with the academic analysis, examples of student work, and other information prepared prior to conferences. You ask the parent to take a few minutes and look over it. When they have done so, you ask what questions they have at this point. You ask the parent to tell you more about their student, what they like about school and don't like about school. Ask what their students outside of school interests are, and anything else the parent feels would be important for you to know before you share the prepared conference information.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's take 10 more seconds. Okay, so we see that number 2 was the winner. Obviously, you can, when you're running these, you can obviously go with how you progress through the sim. You can be the majority rules, or it can go by any way you choose. And again, if you're doing this in breakouts, you could have different instances in the breakout rooms where each group of students is playing their own instance of the sim. So, and then you bring them back together to debrief collectively, but you can allow them to each have their own, choose their own pathways through the sim experience. So again, that you can diversify, if you will, and then through the debrief, they get a sense of what some of the other pathways might have been and why they chose them. But anybody want to share why they chose what they did?
I think just opening it up to the parent to have them share and really demonstrate to them, like, I'm curious to know what you would want to know about your child and how they're performing in school. I thought about like 1 and 3 as maybe being important originally, but then I switched my thinking because I thought like a parent likely who's coming to see me for parent teacher conferences would have already kept up with the grade book and might already know how they're doing. So maybe then that feels like kind of tone deaf to say, oh, well, here's what they've been doing. Look at their work samples.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? And the number 5, anybody want to share that? Okay, and in the interest of moving forward, let's choose 2.
Yes, I understand the data, but my student does well in all their other classes. Their attitude toward this class indicates to me that the instruction needs to be more engaging. From my perspective, improving your performance is the key to improving my child's performance.
Commotion in the hallway. It seems that the conferences are dwindling down, and as a result, the hallway is filled with parents finding their way out. It is suddenly quite loud. The parent who had been waiting in the doorway did not close the door behind them when they left. You feel that even getting up to close the door might be taken as a sign of neglect on your part by the parent you are meeting with, and so you maintain your composure and work to conclude the conference. It's 8 p.m. and you realize that the parent is not satisfied with the conversation and seeking information and support beyond what you can provide. What will you do now? At 8 p.m., you thank the parent for coming and note that the time is up and conferences are ending for the night. Use a business-like tone and ask the parent to be in touch by email with any questions. Continue visiting with this parent beyond 8 p.m. Eventually, all the information prepared for the conference is shared with the parent. Ask the parent if it would be okay to pause the conference and meet again in a couple of days at the parent's convenience. Show the parent you are committed to their student. Suggest that there are issues at play here that are new to you. Another option, specify on next screen. On the next screen, note what elements of the options listed you would combine for a better decision, or note any other approach you would take beyond the options listed.
So here we do actually offer the opportunity to enter in what that fourth option would be. If you would do something different than what these options are as you're trying to navigate through this. In the interest of time, why don't we go ahead and end the poll? Any of the number fours want to share real quick? Let's go ahead with 3. And I just want to get to one of the things that well, if anybody's interested, obviously you can let us know. We'll be happy to share the simulation with you, and you'll have access to play this more with a little bit more, attention certainly as we get to the end. But I do want to be able to share with you what the feedback report looks like. And so just to get a sense of, when we think about navigating in a simulation, it is important that students also get a sense of the flow of time, right? There's no such thing as a one and done, right? You're going to navigate and there are going to be consequences, and those consequences continue. And in fact, in the flow of this, she's not going to be happy, and she's going to go and enroll. She's going to go talk to the principal, and there's going to be a follow-up meeting with the principal and you, and that's kind of where this ends up going. And that's the totality of the experience. And again, it's just designed to be an experience, not the experience. Danielle, if you could stop sharing for a minute. And so from the standpoint of being able to, bring this to, as you would get to the end of the simulation. And so I'm going to show you this. Hopefully this is coming through on the screens. Again, you don't necessarily need to see it as clearly. Can you see? Jamie, you're still showing on my screen. Are you able to read this?
No, it's okay. Like I can kind of read it, but it's not as clear as it was previously.
Okay, so I just really want to show you what it looks like. And you play the sim and you get to the end. So this kind of stuff at the top is just showing you the pathway through the sim. So it just gives you a sense of, because again, we hold off until the end. It's a delayed feedback model. The only feedback you're getting during play is obviously the pathway, right? The consequence, whether it was good or bad. But here we give you insight into what happened during the sim. So we remind you what each interaction was. This first one is, please share what information you currently bring. And here are some considerations of things from a reflection perspective that you may have been thinking about when you did this. And below, we capture what was actually written. This is played before, so this isn't the current one. This can be printed out as a PDF and taken with or saved to the cloud. And here then is the first choice that we made. It reminds you of the scene, what the learning objective in that scene was, the choice that you made, the other choices, and the specific feedback on the choice. So you get this for each decision that's made in the sim. This report is generated, and they get that, and they can submit it if you want that information, especially for the qualitative responses. The reason why we don't actually do tracking, because as we talked about, the idea in simulation is this is a safe space to make mistakes. And we don't want students to feel like they're being watched, right? This is an opportunity to safely fail, so to speak. Even if you may not know what you're doing, just try stuff out. It's okay. Nobody's looking. And if you want to submit a different report, just play the sim again. And as you notice, it doesn't take that long. And often we get a lot of response. Since you can't go back, since there are no do-overs, students often want to see what would have happened if they did a different choice, and they go back and they play it again if you give them the link to do that. That's totally up to you from an implementation perspective. But so in terms of how you deploy and how you share and engaging with your students, that's totally up to you. And so real quickly, I want to transition to just giving you a sense of when you subscribe. Actually, I'll show you what it's a library of simulations, and here is the list of the teacher sims library. And we're again happy to share this overview document, which also provides insight into what's going on inside of each sim, as broken down by the simulation snapshot, a little bit about the context, who the key characters are, trade-offs that are at play in that sim, potential topics for discussion if you're embedding this into a curriculum. And also it's aligned to the CAPE and InTask standards in terms of being able to deploy. So I'm happy to share this document for anybody who's interested with the overviews of the simulation library. But the other thing that I wanted to share is that in terms of the way that we navigate, we have a portal that allows you to control the deployment of the sims. So the sims are just a link. So if you notice in the menu bar, you can see not in the URL bar, it's just a URL which you create inside of the portal. And then you can assign it either to yourself if you're running it in your class, or to assign it to students if you're doing it in breakouts, or if you're doing it asynchronously, or you can post it into a Blackboard or Canvas if you're doing the asynchronous curricula. And you'd be able to do that by viewing, you can view the simulation library and be able to, I might have timed out. Yep, there it is. And you can filter through the simulation by protagonist, which is in this case teachers, the parent, so you can find it from the stakeholder perspective or from the standards perspective. We have leadership sims as well, so you're seeing the broader library in this case. But this is the way in which we would deploy, you would deploy the simulations and be able to utilize them as you saw fit across your curricula over the course of your semester, over the course of time, etc. Any questions, thoughts?
Hi, Ken. I left a question in the chat, but I was wondering, generally speaking, you had mentioned that this simulation had kind of like a broad singular outcome in which the parent, we were going to have a follow-up meeting with the parent and the principal. So would you say that, is that true of the other simulations as well, that they're designed to have a singular outcome? Or if not, how many different versions or outcomes do the simulations have?
So in this case, you're dealing with an angry parent. So, the ability to satisfy them was going to be, that's kind of one of an element in that scenario, as within the partner that we designed it with. In each simulation, there's anywhere from 6 to 10 decision points. And each of those decision points has multiple, obviously, options, as you saw. And we actually have sims with multiple epilogues. So where you end up in different places. It really depends on so all the sims, so that and this is an option as well, obviously, when in working with us, all of the sims are done in collaboration with somebody. We want the stories to be inspired by, if you will, real experiences from the field. That lends a level of authenticity to them, so that it's not somebody kind of in an ivory tower coming up with ideas. It's actually from somebody's real experiences. We're not trying to recreate history, but at least that it's inspired by that. And so that kind of becomes the driver of the experience that the sim is designed to provide or provoke. But we can obviously do multiple pathways depending on, again, the experience that's appropriate for the level of depth we want that experience to go through in terms of navigating within that kind of circumstance. So some of them do have, you know, it kind of gets wrapped up, and some are left wide open. And in fact, the part of the epilogue becomes thinking about, well, what would you do next, right? We're going to kind of put a period at the end of that timeline that we've simulated, but obviously it's not over, right? Time continues. You got to come back to class the next day or the next week. And so, you know, how you use that in terms of harnessing the engagement value from the narrative perspective to get them thinking about how it applies is obviously something that you can benefit from to support other aspects of your curricula, because your students will all have had that shared experience. You now have a parent that you can refer to, and everybody knows who you're talking about. So in this way, you can utilize those characters, and there are other colorful characters that are allow you that kind of leverage to support other lessons that you might be doing spread out more broadly across your curricula. Any other questions, thoughts? But thank you for that. So we are offering, if anybody's interested, please use the QR code. You can get free access, trial access for the rest of the, I guess the summer semester. You can obviously get access to this simulation and be able to play with it a little bit, but you can look at the other simulations as well. And again, to give you a sense of those titles, I'm sorry, I'll go back to the QR code in 1 second. But you do have a variety of other topics and that span some elementary, some middle, some high school scenarios, but these are all contextual in nature, which means that some of the relationships might be applicable. Even the middle school may be applicable for the elementary, and vice versa, because again of the issue of dealing with interpersonal, organizational dynamics, stakeholder management, those kinds of issues that tend to be challenging, especially for the less experienced, are opportunities to, again, be in an authentic context and apply or practice accordingly. Any other questions? I will put my email into chat if anybody is interested in questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. Oh, send it to Jamie. Why it's not to the entire group? Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. I'm happy to stay on if you have additional questions, but we are nearing the top of the hour. So thank you for this. Love to chat with you further about the potential application for this modality in your work. And again, if you have any questions, happy to stay on. So wishing you all a wonderful weekend, a wonderful holiday next week, and to a good summer.